Hi, I'm James, M0YOM, creator of QSO Director. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps that you'll have to go through the very first time you run the application. So to start with, we're going to launch the application. It's the same whether you're running it in Windows, Linux or Mac. So we'll fire it up there. And you'll initially see the splash screen, followed by the license agreement. Now, if you've ever installed any software, you'll be fairly familiar with these. Have a read through the license agreement and click on accept. Next, we're presented with a beta release warning. So this particular version is a beta release, and we just get a little warning just saying that there might be a few more bugs or some features might not be quite complete. We'll click accept to that. The next step we need to do is choose our database folder location. So this is where QSO Director is going to store all of its data files and the database and all of your QSOs. So we can either type it in here or we can click choose. And in this case, I'm going to pop it in this folder. You can pick any folder that you like. So we'll click select, click on OK. It'll run through a few things. It'll now ask us to sign in. Now, since this is the very first time we're running it, we'll have to sign in. If we were to click no, we'll get a warning saying that it needs to validate its license, and we'll get the login box here. I've already signed in, so I can click my name here. If you haven't already signed in, you can enter your email address that you signed up with. So we'll click that, enter our password and hit sign in. First thing it will do there is update critical information that it needs from the internet. So in this case, it's country information that's required in order to run the application. That'll just take a moment to download and process. This only happens occasionally when there's updates to this data, so you won't see this every time you launch the application. Now it's finished doing that, it'll then ask you if you want to update optional external data. We're going to say yes. You could choose to say no, but I'd advise doing this. It's useful for information like IOTA data and things like that. So we'll hit there, yes, and it'll give you a progress while it's updating it. It usually only takes a few moments. There we go, that's complete. So you then receive this pop-up. Again, this only happens the very first time you run the application. We need to provide it with a little bit of information about your station. So in this case, we've got the station name. Usually that would be something like home. If you run multiple stations, it's useful to be able to identify them. You can change all of this information later in the application. So if you make a mistake, don't worry, it's easy to go back and correct it. So we'll call that home. We'll pop in my call sign here, and then we'll click next. Next, it needs to know some operator information. So I'll pop in my name there. If your operator call sign differs from your station call sign, we can also enter an operator call sign here. But if we leave it blank, the station's call sign will be used. We'll click next. We can then enter some address information. You don't have to, but the country is required. It'll default that country for you. Click next. We then have to pick our region. Now, I'm in region 1. If you're in region 2 or 3, you'll have to select that. It's quite important that you select the correct region because that affects how the band layouts and band maps work. We can enter some locator information, the CQ zone, the ITU zone, latitude, longitude, grid reference, and so forth. Once you've entered some of this information, so if we were to put in a locator, for instance, we can then calculate the missing information from that. And it doesn't matter whether you enter a grid reference, a latitude, longitude, or the locator, it'll calculate whatever's missing. We'll then click next. We can then enter some additional information. So special interest groups, transmitter power, license type, so on and so forth. And then we'll hit save. Get a notification saying it's been saved correctly. We'll click close. And then we can choose what kind of activity we're doing. So at the moment in this particular release, general logging is the only one available. So we'll click onto that. And we've received the default layout of the application. Now, if we then close down the application and relaunch it, you'll see this time we just get the beta release warning, click accept, choose what type of operating we're doing, and then we're straight into the application. So it's nice and simple for subsequent launches of the application. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to subscribe, like and comment, and I'll see you in the next one.